analytical equations and the chart. It's an open circuited line. It's a coaxial transmission line, which is fine because the theory applies to two-wire line as well as coaxial line. Frequency of operation is 100 megahertz. The line length is 1 meter. The characteristic impedance is 50 ohm, 50 ohm. Okay. We are supposed to figure out the reflection coefficient at the load end and at the generator end or sending end. When they say reflection coefficient, by default, they mean voltage reflection coefficient. Okay. And then the VSWR on the line and CSWR also, which are equal to each other anyway. We have seen in the past. And then the input impedance. Now for analytical equations, we know how to handle this. Let's look at that first. Load and reflection coefficient is ZL minus Z0 divided by ZL plus Z0, and we are letting ZL go to infinity now because it's an open circuited line. So the limit simply gives you 1. You divide numerator and denominator by ZL and then allow ZL to go to infinity, you get plus 1. So reflection coefficient at the load end is plus 1. Okay. Or 1 plus J0 if you want. At the sending end also, the magnitude will not change, but a phase shift will get into the game. We have proven this equation. Tau in is tau L multiplied by e to the power minus 2j beta L. It's an air-filled line, so lambda will be c divided by f. C is speed of light, f is given as 100 megahertz. So lambda turns out to be 3 meters per cycle, of course. Electrical length will be L divided by lambda. It's a 1 meter long line, so 1 divided by 3 is the electrical length. Okay. The value of beta L is what we need, and that turns out to be beta is 2 pi divided by lambda. So 2 pi divided by lambda multiplied by lambda divided by 3, that gives you 2 pi divided by 3 radians, which is 120 degree. Okay. So if I put all that in tau in formula, tau L is plus 1, so I get e to the power minus 2j beta L, which in rectangular form can be written as cos 2 beta L minus j sin 2 beta L. Double check my calculations. The answer is e to the power minus j 240 degrees. You can always express it as e to the power plus j 120 degrees by adding 360 degrees to the angle. Sin beta L and cos beta L values have been calculated separately. You can double check my calculations, but it's fairly straightforward to calculate the input reflection coefficient from the load reflection coefficient. Part C is VSWR, which is 1 plus magnitude of tau L divided by 1 minus magnitude of tau L. So 1 plus 1 divided by 1 minus 1, which is infinity. The ratio of maximum to minimum voltage magnitudes will be infinity for open circuited line. Basically, everything gets reflected back. That's what happens. CSWR is same as VSWR, so same answer. Now for Zin, the last part, the formula is well known to you by now. We plug in the values. In fact, we allow ZL to go to infinity first. So the formula simplifies to minus j z naught cot beta L. And I put the value of cot beta L, which is 1 upon 10 beta L. The input impedance turns out to be purely imaginary, around J 28.87 ohm. This is as far as the analytical equations go. Now look at the same problem solution using Smith chart. The first step is to normalize the load impedance with Z0. ZL is infinity because it's an open circuited load. So we will call it infinity plus J0. Okay. As a result, the normalized value for resistance RLN will be infinity, and for XLN, it will be 0. Now this has to be mapped to a point on the Smith chart. RLN equal to infinity, XLN equal to 0. On the chart, if you recall, I told you there are constant resistance circles, which are the full circles, almost full circles, and constant reactance circles, which are partial circles in the upper half and lower half. Look at the full circles. The value of RLN for each circle is given. Starting from the left, the outermost circle is RLN equal to 0. Then one circle and the second one is RLN equal to 0.1. That means in between you have RLN equal to 0.05. Then 0.2, then 0.3, then 0.4, and so on until we get RLN equal to 1, which brings us to the center. Then RLN starts increasing as we go towards right, and circles start becoming smaller and smaller in diameter. As RLN goes to infinity, the circle collapses into a single point at the right extreme on the horizontal line. Okay. And XLN is 0 anyway, which means horizontal line. All the positive XLN values are in the upper half of the chart, all the negative values are in the bottom half. In between, the horizontal line represents XLN equal to 0. It can be seen from the equations I showed you last time. So point P is right here. That is step number 1. Okay. Next what? You can read this. Now, reflection coefficient at the load end, it will have, in theory at least, it will have both magnitude and phase, right? How do you read the magnitude? You take this length OP and go down to one of the scales at the bottom. Look at reflection coefficient E or I. Don't look at reflection coefficient P. That is power reflection coefficient. We are not worried about it. Reflection coefficient E or I, by E, Smith means voltage. In those days, I guess they were calling it E because it's EMF. I'm calling it V. So remember that the reflection coefficient, comma, E or I is the scale you are going to use to calculate voltage reflection coefficient. From the center towards the left is the scale for reflection coefficient, and from the center on the same scale on the right, there is something else. Ignore that completely. You don't need it, right? That is transmission coefficient. Don't worry about it, right? Okay. So what you do is you take that entire OP length, and from the center, you mark a point which is of the same length towards the left. You will hit reflection coefficient equal to 1. Right here at the leftmost point on the scale. After 0.9, 0.92, 0.94, 0.96, 0.98, and 1. You will get +1 as the magnitude of the voltage reflection coefficient graphically, which is same as what we got using the analytical equation. How about the angle of reflection coefficient? You extend this line OP, all the way to the end of the chart. And here, one of the circular scales, the chart officially ends at point P, but after that, scales are there for several things of interest. Angle of reflection coefficient is the first scale. Sorry, actually, angle of transmission coefficient is the first scale. Ignore that. The second scale is for the angle of reflection coefficient, and you try to read it carefully. +20 degree here, -20 on the other side. So in between it has to be 0. This chart needs a lot of practice. I hope you can get a hard copy printed at home and practice with it. +20 degrees and -20 degrees points you see. So in the center, it will represent 0 degrees. It's not written, but it's understood that you will be able to interpret. So the angle of the reflection coefficient is 0 degrees. That is what we got anyway, using analytical equations. How about VSWR and CSWR? Again, you go back to the bottom scales. There is the uppermost scale called SWR, which means both VSWR and CSWR. Again, from the center towards the left, you move by the distance OP. You see that at the center, VSWR is 1, then it is 1.1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, and so on. It starts increasing, it reaches 4, 5, 10, 20, 40, 100, and then it hits infinity. So rightmost point on SWR scale towards the left, sorry, leftmost point on the SWR scale represents infinity value. After 100, they have not written any values because values are too large, and you will consider the last point as infinite value. That is how SWR is read. Okay. Now reflection coefficient at the input end. For that, you need to figure out beta L value, which we have figured out as 1/3 already. Beta L was, sorry, not beta L, L by lambda, I'm sorry. L divided by lambda is 1/3, right? So from the point P, you move towards the generator because you want to go to the input, and the direction is clockwise. It is mentioned on the chart also that if you want to go towards the generator, you move clockwise. At the outermost periphery, you see L by lambda values. For your line that you have drawn, OP line extended all the way to the end, you read L by lambda equal to 0.25, right? To that, you add 0.33, which will give you 0.5 and 0.25 anyway, so let's say 0.33 added to this will, see, this chart essentially covers lambda by 2 length. Total chart covers 0.5 lambda. Half of the chart covers 0.25 lambda. Because we know from past discussions that after lambda by 2 length, everything repeats. So Smith drew the chart only for lambda by 2 length. The total periphery belongs to lambda by 2 length. So from 0.25 lambda, you travel by 180 degree, you will hit 0.5 lambda, or which is 0, because once you exceed 0.5 lambda, you subtract 0.5 from it to get back to 0. And from there, additional 0.08 will give you 0.33 approximately. So this is how I ended up at the position 0.08. It should be little more than that, I know. I'm doing approximate calculations because 1 by 3 actually is 0.33333. So if you include that, this may change a little bit, but the position for L by lambda that you are going to be looking at will be around 0.08. It will be actually 0.083 something. So I mark that point, and from that point, I draw a line connecting to the center of the circle. Okay. And then I read the phase of the reflection coefficient again on the same scale that I was using at the load end. I get around 120 degrees approximately, which is the correct answer. Now for input impedance calculation, what we do is we see this second line and where it hits the circle which was representing P. That is the outermost circle. So you see on the outermost circle where this line cuts and mark that point as Q. This point Q represents the input impedance normalized. You now figure out which constant R circle passes through Q, approximately at least, and which constant X circle passes through Q. Okay. Constant R circle that is passing through Q is the outermost circle, which is marked as R equal to 0. So the real part of Z in N will be 0. For figuring out the imaginary part, you see out of these circles, which circle, obviously one of them is point, it's very difficult to read it here. I think one of them is 0.6 and the other one is 0.5. So in between somewhere is the X in normalized value. You try to approximate as best as you can. It's a graphical technique, you know. You cannot be super accurate, but you try your best. So I think around 0.54 something is the normalized value of the input reactance. Let me see what I wrote. It's all written here anyway. You can read it all. Tau L magnitude is obtained by using the reflection coefficient E or I scale at the bottom of the chart. Do not use reflection coefficient P scale. From the center of the scale in the middle, we move in a horizontal line towards left by a distance equal to OP and read the magnitude of tau L, which is 1. We have done it, okay? Angle is read by, I've explained it to you, you can read it also later. Tau in, I told you already, you move by 0.33 lambda clockwise, and in the new position, you read the angle value again. If in doubt, read this carefully later. VSWR is easy to figure out, CSWR is easy to figure out. Yeah, okay, I took 0.56 as the approximate value because maybe my markings are not perfect. It should be 0.0833 actually. So roughly, the value of input reactance is 0.56 multiplied by 50 because normalized value is 0.56. You got to multiply it by Z0 to get the ohm value. It turns out to be almost 28 ohm, which is close enough to what we got analytical. Analytical answer was 28.87. Yeah. So if you do it more accurately, maybe you'll get even more accurate answer than what I. Okay. Now, second problem says repeat the same thing as in problem 1, but with short circuited loop. In this case, tau L, let's start using the analytical equations first. Tau L is ZL minus Z0 divided by ZL plus Z0 when ZL goes to 0. So it should be -1 now. For open circuited case, tau L is +1. For short circuited case, it is -1. 1 with an angle of 180 degrees or -1 plus J0, whichever way you want to put it. Tau input will be same value as tau L, but with a phase shift of e to the power minus J240 degrees. Okay. So I have converted -1 into e to the power J180 degrees. So that gives me e to the power minus J60 degrees, which can be converted to rectangular form if necessary. VSWR again is infinity because magnitude of tau L is again 1. Actual value is -1, but magnitude is +1. So VSWR, which depends on magnitude of tau L, not the complex value of tau L, is again infinity. Both short circuit and open circuit loads give infinite VSWR, at least in a lossless line. Zin can be calculated using the same equation. Now you put ZL equal to 0. So the formula that you get is J Z0 tan beta L. So it should be minus J86.860. Smith chart for this problem is right here. Now the starting point, the load position will be, it's a short circuited load. So RLN is 0, which represents the largest constant resistance circle. So point P will be the starting point. And you can take OP value again and read the values. You will get what you got in the past for SWR as well as magnitude of tau L. Now you move I think this is not right. Oh yeah, it is right. 0.33 lambda, yes. I have to move from point P towards in the clockwise direction by 0.33 lambda. So if I move by 0.25, I get to the rightmost point. Then another 0.08 is what I move, and I get this value here almost. 0.33 almost, yeah. So again, I join this point with the center of the chart and read the input impedance value by seeing which circles are passing through it. And then whatever values you get, in fact, you will get imaginary value again. Real value will be 0 again, because the circle passing through Q is again having R equal to 0. Normalized value of resistance equal to 0. The imaginary part you can double check. It turns out to be close enough to what we have calculated. Please go through this carefully once you get the document. Now the third problem, which is more realistic. Suppose load is 100 ohm. It's neither open circuit nor short circuit. Same transmission line, but load has changed to 100 ohms. Now tau L will be ZL minus Z0 divided by ZL plus Z0, which is 100 minus 50 divided by 100 plus 50. It is 0.333 something. No phase angle in the reflection coefficient. Input reflection coefficient, of course, will get a phase angle. E to the power minus, I missed J here, I'm sorry about that. 0.3333 e to the power minus J240 degrees. Okay. And VSWR now will not be infinity. It is 1 plus magnitude of tau L divided by 1 minus magnitude of tau L. So 1 plus 1 upon 3 divided by 1 minus 1 upon 3, which works out to 2. CSWR will be same as VSWR. Zin you can calculate again by using the same formula. Tan beta L has not changed, but ZL has become 100 ohms now. So we plug in all the numbers I got 36.69 ohm with a phase angle of about 33 degrees. And the answer in rectangular form can also be worked out. Now on the Smith chart, what will happen? The normalized value of load impedance is 2 plus J0. It's 100 ohm, right? So 100 plus J0 divided by 50 is 2 plus J0. So J0 means reactance is 0. So you still stick to the horizontal line. However, now P would belong to the circle which has got 2 marked on it. Right here. P is now here. It's not at the center, it's not at the end. It is somewhere in the middle. Now you take OP distance and go down to the lines below, to the scales below, and measure SWR as well as the magnitude of tau L. We get VSWR almost 2 and reflection coefficient magnitude around 0.33, as theory says. Okay. The angle of reflection coefficient can be read again by extending this OP line all the way to the end and reading the angle here. It is 0 degree again, which is true because it's a real load. Then you move by 0.33 lambda again and you come to the point which is shown here. Join that point to the center. Now at this point, you mark Q so that OQ is same as OP. Now you are trying to maintain the same value of tau. So OP and OQ have to be equal, and at Q you read the input impedance. And then whatever values you get, you multiply by 50 ohm to get the actual values. I think I got the right answers here also. And this is the last one, I think, where I have taken solution from somewhere, which is illustrated much better than what I could do. Here the load is a complex number. It has got both real and imaginary parts. It's a 50 ohm line, so normalized load will be 5 plus J25 divided by 50. Okay, which will be 0.1 plus J 0.5. No units. So we mark that. Solution is here. Yeah, 0.1 plus J 0.5. He is not showing the suffix N. ZL means normalized value. This is where this load will map. That is point P. You see the constant resistance circle passing through this point has got the value 0.1, and constant reactance circle passing through this point has the value 0.5. If you read it here, it's right here, it's like 0.5. You have to learn how to read the chart. So much data is there. You have to filter out things and look at what you are really interested in. So this is the starting point. Then you take this distance from the center of the chart to this point and use the scales at the bottom. We get VSWR equal to 13 almost, and magnitude of tau is almost 0.855. I'm sure you can verify these answers using analytical equations also. Okay. Then what is the value of L by lambda? Let's see, what have they given? It's 0.1 lambda. Okay, so L by lambda is 0.1. So you move towards the generator by 0.1. This is 0.1 distance, 0.1 lambda. Lambda is understood, okay? The values written are in terms of lambda. So this value on the left side is between 0.08 and 0.06. To that you add 0.1 and come to 0.17 something to mark the input position. And then join that line to the center. The angle of the input reflection coefficient can be read directly from the appropriate scale. It is around 55 degrees between, just a minute, yeah, between 50 and 60. So it is around 55 degrees. The angle for reflection coefficient is marked in degrees here. Keep that in mind. The magnitude of reflection coefficient will not change. It will be the same as it was at the load end. Okay. Input reflection coefficient, sorry, input impedance now can be read by marking which circles are passing through this point. And he got 0.38 as the value for the constant R circle and 1.88 plus 1.88 for the constant X circle. You can verify this. Constant X circle is right here. Yeah, it is between 1.8 and 2. So it is 1.88 almost. Yeah, he's right. And constant R circle passing through this point is between these two circles that you see. It's difficult for me to read it out, but he has done the right job, I'm sure. Okay. So this is how you do complex loads. There are many more problems here. I don't think you should get too far into this document, although I'll send it to you. You should be able to figure out, essentially speaking, input impedance, reflection coefficient, magnitude and phase at the load end as well as at the generator end, and VSWR for a given lossless line. That is the minimum expectation when it comes to using this Smith chart. Smith chart can be used for a lot of things other than all this. But I think we will take that up if time permits in this course. Otherwise, in a subsequent course called Microwave Engineering, which will be offered to you next semester. Smith chart is a very powerful tool in terms of giving you a very quick solution to a given problem. It may be approximate, but it is still worth considering. Okay. So I think as far as Smith chart goes, I will not go any further. We can always take things offline if it is necessary. Now, another thing which I think we should look at is a very interesting variation on coaxial line, which is highly suitable for integrated circuit applications. Transmission line theory is valid for this, but practical details are very different. At least I can begin describing it today, and we will take the math later on. Strip line is essentially an attempt to bring integrated circuit technology into the microwave world. Most of the lines that we have looked at so far are quite bulky, while the world is moving towards miniaturization. So microwave engineers also said, why can't we do the same? Why can't we reduce the size of everything and make it lighter and still reliable from the performance point of view? One attempt was made a while ago at Bell Laboratories in the US. They came up with a transmission line called strip line. Every theory that we have looked at for transmission lines will apply here, but it's a different kind of transmission line that we are looking at. We are going to be looking at. start with the coaxial line conceptually. It has two conductors which have the same center. The outer conductor is hollow, inner conductor is solid. In between, you have got dielectric material filled. Okay. Now, suppose you let the radius of the outer conductor go to infinity. Instead of a circle, it would become two parallel plates. Remember, this line, what we are looking at is the cross section in the XY plane. The length of the line is in the Z direction, which is perpendicular to the plane of the paper. I'm unable to show it here. It's a 2D picture I'm showing, but length is along Z axis. You can imagine the Z axis, I'm sure. Okay. So, if you allow the outer conductor to have infinite radius, you'll get two parallel planes. And in between, you will still have the circular conductor. Sorry, that page has been repeated. A lot of details that you know already, but I again put it back there. Let me go to the conceptual side. Yeah, this is what you'll get. This is how engineers at Bell Labs started thinking in those days. Now, this is not easy to realize also. It is too much of work to put a circular conductor between two conducting planes. So what they said, why can't we make the circular conductor in the middle also to have a rectangular cross section? And that kind of topology is quite compatible with integrated circuit manufacturing techniques, because they can deposit rectangular cross sections very easily. Circular cross sections are not that easy. This is how strip line was arrived at. If I take this structure that you are looking at and allow the inner conductor to have a rectangular cross section, I have a strip line with me. This line and the coaxial line also, although we have not done the electromagnetics yet, take it from me that these kind of lines support what we call a transverse electromagnetic mode . I'll show it to you. I've written it somewhere here. Essentially, at least that much you can appreciate, that in any transmission line, if you look at electric and magnetic fields instead of voltage and current, in general, there will be three components for the electric field: Ex, Ey, Ez, and three components for the magnetic field: Hx, Hy, Hz, right? In cylindrical coordinate system, the nomenclature might change, but still we'll get three components, no question about that. Now, if in a line, there is no electric field component along the direction of propagation, that is Ez equal to 0, and no component of magnetic field also in the direction of propagation, that is Hz equal to 0. That means you have only Ex, Ey, Hx, and Hy. Then it is known as transverse electromagnetic mode of propagation, TEM. In the second half of the course, this will be taught to you in detail, but take that much from me. Coaxial line has been shown to support that kind of a mode. It has no E field along the direction of propagation, no H field along the direction of propagation. It has only Ex, Ey, Hx, and Hy fields. Even two-wire line, although I have not done electromagnetics, even that line has the same situation. No E field along the direction of propagation, no H field along the direction of propagation. TEM mode is relatively easy, mathematically speaking, to fight with. So we love it, So that same TEM mode will continue to work for the strip line also. That is the essential point I'm trying to tell. Even in this line, the direction of propagation is at 90 degree to the plane of the paper that you are looking at right now. X direction is the horizontal direction, Y direction is the vertical direction, Z direction is the Z axis, okay? So there will be no E component along the Z direction, there will be no H component along the Z direction. With that, and by the way, all that is approximate, because ideally speaking, the length of the conductors, which are called ground planes, because we normally ground them, and the central conductor is normally kept connected to the live signal. This is the way we work most of the time. So the outer conductors, which are grounded, ideally should have infinite length. In practice, that's not possible. So as long as the length is large enough, let's say 2 lambda, let's say more than 5 lambda or so, you will get almost a TEM mode in a strip line. Okay. There's a lot of parameters here. You have a dielectric material, and we would assume for now that it is a lossless material. So it has only a dielectric constant epsilon r, which is real. The distance between the two ground planes, which in coaxial line was equal to 2b. Here I am calling it 2h. Yeah, I am assuming a symmetric case. That means the central conductor is symmetrically located along the y-axis. So the top ground plane is h away from the strip, and the bottom ground plane is also h away from the strip. Another complication that comes in is that the metal that you are using will also have some thickness. It will be small, I know, but it would be good to keep it in mind that it is not zero thickness metal. So small t is the symbol normally used for metal thickness. Small h is the symbol used for half of the separation between ground planes. W is the symbol used for the width of the strip, and the width means the longer dimension. The other dimension is so small, it is the thickness of the metal, which is actually in microns anyway. So although I'm calling it 2T, but in practice you don't even appreciably see that. Dimensions H and W are quite large compared to T. That's the reality. The way IC manufacturing works, the metal thickness is always in microns, while H and W can be in millimeters, at least fraction of millimeters. That's the reality. But still, for the sake of completeness, I'm showing thickness of the metal in the diagram. Strip line supports TEM mode 2 as long as L is sufficiently large. Now, this is a transmission line like any other line. So the parameters that you would like to know, obviously, are the phase velocity, the phase constant, the attenuation constant, the characteristic impedance, and so on. Lot of research has been done on this topic. I don't think we will be going into detailed research papers. Believe me, people have spent their entire lives in trying to analyze these lines to death. And what we have got today in books is the outcome of that research in several different formats. And I'll give you one set of equations which are reasonably accurate. None of these equations are 100% correct, but they are close enough to reality within a few percent, especially when frequencies of operation are not too large, not beyond 3 or 4 gigahertz. After that, TEM mode assumption actually starts failing. If frequencies are too high, EZ and HZ are no more negligible. That's a very complicated situation. We'll ignore that in this course for now at least. So the equations that I'm showing you, the speed of light, of course, is the fundamental constant that would show up everywhere. Phase velocity has been shown to be speed of light divided by square root of the dielectric constant of the material between the ground planes. It will be proven to you in the second half of the course anyway. Phase velocity is simple enough to calculate. Beta is omega divided, Vp is omega divided by beta. So you can use that formula here also. And lambda, the wavelength of propagation, is 2 pi divided by beta. So using all that, I've written equations for your quick reference. The wavelength of propagation inside this transmission line, we are almost out of time, so I'll stop here. The wavelength of propagation inside this transmission line is actually smaller than the free space wavelength by a factor which is square root of the dielectric constant. As a result, beta goes up. Beta is 2 pi by lambda. So beta, the phase shift per unit length, goes up in a strip line Of course, you can also imagine strip lines with epsilon r equal to 1. There's a possibility you can have air between them. Then in these equations, Vp would become C, beta would become 2 pi by lambda naught, etc. But air-filled strip line is normally not that common. It is mechanically difficult to make anyway. So we will assume that epsilon r is other than air. The medium is other than air. Okay.